Greetings, I'm Ashley, and I'm about to share the life part of how I managed to redirect my husband's desires, eventually leading to our divorce. Now, he's officially my ex, a relief I can't express enough. The divorce process felt like an eternity, and I couldn't help but wonder why it always takes so long. Shortly before our divorce was finalized, my soon-to-be ex-husband George undertook an 8-hour journey to meet me. He pleaded for a final conversation, but I refused to open the door. Why? Well, earlier that day I had stumbled upon something that solidified my decision. Our marriage had become a burden, and I was eager to conclude the charade of pretending there was still care and love between us. Despite 7 years together, George and I had drifted apart, and the toxic nature of our relationship had reached its limit. When George showed up, desperately asking for another chance, I knew I had to stand firm. "I'm sorry, George, but I can't continue this." He persisted, begging me to listen. But I had heard it all before. The cycle of pain and disappointment had to end. It was time for both of us to move on. Despite his relentless knocks and calls, I remained resolute. I couldn't let emotions sway my decision. After what felt like an eternity, he finally left. To understand my stance better, let's rewind a few months. George and I were caught in yet another heated argument. It was a familiar script. He wasn't listening, and I was frustrated with his consistent neglect, especially in simple matters like cleaning up after himself. It felt like he needed to be told the same things repeatedly, and the exhausting cycle had taken its toll. "I don't feel like being overly nurturing and affectionate with you, George. You're an adult, so why not act like one? I'm not sure what you're talking about." "Well, if that's the case, why don't I just leave? Why don't you do the same?" I make up my mind to leave, and after a couple of days, he inevitably follows me to the hotel where I'm staying, begging for my forgiveness. Each time, I convince myself that our issues are too trivial for a divorce. But truth be told, when someone doesn't change despite constant reminders, it becomes tiring and breeds resentment. That's precisely what happened. I observed him growing distant and getting closer to a coworker. He insisted nothing was happening, but one night something unexpected occurred. During one of our average phases, not particularly bad but certainly not good either, I decided to reignite some lost spark. Welcoming him home like a 1960s wife, I handed him a martini and inquired about his day. His response? "Hey Ashley, what's all this? You didn't have to go through all this trouble. I just wanted to do something special for my man." But instead of embracing the moment, he brushed it off, opting to take a shower first. Frustrated, I asked for a simple hug and kiss, feeling neglected. He responded dismissively, saying he didn't mind, reinforcing my growing dissatisfaction. In that crucial moment, I couldn't bear to let him speak any further. I wrapped myself around him, and he smelled normal, with his usual cologne on, albeit a bit stronger, suggesting recent application. However, my sharp sense of smell picked up on a feminine scent as I pulled away from the hug. Odd, I thought. Even stranger was the lipstick stain I noticed on his collar. Almost instinctively, I slapped him, dropped the martini, and burst into tears. I demanded an explanation, refusing to believe I was imagining things. "Explain yourself," I snapped. Clearly caught off guard, he stuttered and stammered, resembling a nervous kid in a spelling bee. "You're despicable! You're sick!" I lashed out in anger, not caring about waking up the neighbors. "Let them hear how awful you truly are. How could you do this to me after everything we've been through? Did you want to break my heart this time?" He attempted to explain, claiming he didn't expect things to escalate this far and that it just happened. I pressed for details, asking how long he had been cheating on me. The response was vague, leaving me even more devastated. "You really think you can get away with treating me like this?" I exclaimed. "I might just burn this whole house down to the ground." He pleaded against such drastic actions, but my frustration persisted. "You've already destroyed everything. Why not rid myself of the memories we've made together?" He dismissed my emotions as dramatic, but I argued that the time for talking and negotiating was over. I questioned him about where he was during moments of doubt or loneliness, emphasizing the lack of communication that led to this betrayal. "I have no excuses," he admitted. My anger peaked when he confessed to bringing them to our home. "You couldn't sully some other place? You had to decimate and disgrace this home. I've constructed a life for myself, and you, well, you're quite disappointing. My mom's judgment about you was spot on. Do you think I'm overreacting? Just wait, because you haven't witnessed the extent of it yet." I reached a breaking point. I tore apart the house, not caring that it belonged to me. I had plans to sell it and move on. There were too many painful memories here, and this situation was the last straw. I broke dishes, ripped paintings, and destroyed furniture. Upstairs, I yelled and cried, threatening to drain him of every penny in the impending divorce, a decision I was now serious about. In the midst of my rage, he restrained me. Despite my resistance, he was stronger, managing to calm me down. But the violation lingered as his hands were on me. It sickened me to realize I had devoted a decade of my life to this man. My heart was shattered, each shard embedding itself deeper into my core. Strangely, after the dust settled, I found some relief in his infidelity. Maybe it was a twisted way of realizing I was better off without him. George had transformed into a certified bum, expecting to be catered to like a king. His cheating provided a justified reason for ending things, a more solid foundation for closure. The situation, as terrible as it was, offered a clearer path to hold him accountable for the pain I endured. In court, it was easier to argue with cheating allegations than mere disputes over household duties. At this point, I had grown utterly fed up with George. I was eager to be done with him and his constant foolishness. Seriously, what's up with some guys and their inability to show affection and respect when you're together? But as soon as you talk about leaving, suddenly they put in all this effort. That marked the beginning of the end for George and me. We were on the brink of official separation, and divorce proceedings take forever, you know? George, realizing time was ticking, started begging and pleading for us to get back together. He went to extremes, like posting on social media about how much he messed up seeking sympathy. He even got a tattoo of my face on his back. That's just crazy. All these supposed gestures of love just turned me off. There was no way I could forgive him for what he did. I take adultery seriously. Oddly enough, his new workmate, who became his mistress, stuck with him despite him publicly declaring he still wanted me. I guess she was as pathetic as he was. They were a perfect match, even though it was tough for me, having spent 8 years of my life with him. I stood my ground and made sure he couldn't come back into my life. Then, out of the blue, my lawyer called one day, assuring me that the divorce would be finalized soon, possibly in a matter of days. Great news. Finally, I can live in peace, I thought. I celebrated with a glass of wine and took a trip down memory lane to officially mourn and move on. In the attic, sorting through old boxes, I found pictures reminding me of a life I missed. And then I stumbled upon something unexpected, a mineral rights document. I was baffled. Why on earth did we have a mineral rights document? I read it, and to my shock, it turned out that beneath the house I owned, there were precious stones and minerals worth 50 to 80 million. I read and reread, making sure I wasn't mistaken. The information was there, a bit dusty and stained, but undeniably official. Why was this information hidden away? And more importantly, why wasn't I informed about it? I delved deeper into things because the pieces weren't fitting together, and what I uncovered will surprise you just as it stunned me. As I scrutinized the documents for more details, I noticed my ex-husband's signature confirming he was well aware of this information. It suddenly clicked. What if George's eagerness to reconcile was driven by a desire to claim a share of the money? Once the divorce is final, he'd have no entitlement to the riches. I was heartbroken again. I didn't think someone could be so money-hungry. Part of me began to waver, considering his pleas, but I had to remind myself that a wolf in sheep's clothing remains just that. Even though this theory had limited evidence, my gut told me it was driving his determination to get back with me. My suspicions were validated later that day when George showed up at my door. Speak of the devil, right? George, what on earth are you doing here? I asked. He pleaded for another chance, but I stood firm. I can't go through this cycle of pain and disappointment anymore. It's time for us to move on. Persistently, he insisted there was something important to discuss. Skeptical, I inquired, and he revealed there was something precious he'd be leaving behind if we didn't reconcile. Curious, I asked what it was, and with a hesitant tone he said, "You, of course." I firmly declined, expressing my disinterest in pursuing anything further with him. I wished him well in his new life, and for me, I was glad that we were finally done. I slammed the door in his face, but he persisted, knocking and yelling about driving 6 hours just to see me, thinking it would earn him sympathy. Eventually, he left, but the barrage of texts and calls continued. After what felt like hours of calls, I gave in and asked, "What is it, George?" He insisted on talking, claiming he got a nearby hotel and was coming over. Skeptical, I confronted him about his obsession with winning me back. He played innocent, but I wasn't buying it. "You returned the mineral rights document," I accused. There was a pause, caught red-handed. What mineral rights document? He feigned ignorance. I confronted him about the document he signed without informing me, revealing the hidden riches beneath our property. He drove 8 hours to stake a claim. "It's under my property and those documents are mine," I asserted. He threatened to get the documents, but I warned him of legal consequences if he stepped foot on my property. Anger flared, and I called him a selfish maniac who only cared about himself. He tried to justify his actions, but I pointed out how he betrayed our love by cheating. "Why didn't you tell me back then? Why am I only finding this document now?" I questioned, emphasizing his lack of concern. I concluded, "You never cared about me. Goodbye, George. I hope the divorce is finalized by tomorrow." He seemed shocked, asking about tomorrow. I revealed my lawyer's assurance that everything would be done by then. Frustrated, he tried to undermine fate, calling me a bottom feeder. I dismissed his attempts, firm in my decision to move on without him. And that's what you'll always remain once everything is settled tomorrow. Trust and believe that I'm securing all that money, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. I hung up the call before he could say or do anything else, only to find myself bombarded with calls and texts once again. However, these messages, unlike the seemingly sweet and flowery ones I received earlier, were filled with menacing threats and deceitful words. It's truly surprising when a villain reveals themselves. Yet sadly, I had reached a point where it wasn't even all that shocking. I didn't pay attention to his worries. I knew I had achieved my revenge. I had already emerged triumphant. The next day arrived, and I eagerly awaited the news of my divorce becoming official, like a child waiting for Christmas morning. I yearned to be free of this man so deeply that my heart raced at the mere thought of the newfound freedom that would arrive around 12 a.m. that morning. Ladies and gentlemen, I became a liberated woman. My attorney phoned me to convey that all arrangements were settled, and I was now completely disassociated from that individual. I spent the subsequent hours reveling in dance and celebration. Additionally, I updated my lawyer on the details of the mineral rights document, and he shared in my delight upon realizing that none of the funds were attributed to that worthless and pathetic individual. Naturally, my joyous celebration had an abrupt interruption when, unsurprisingly, George called me. Seizing the moment to revel a bit, I picked up the phone. "Hello, Ashley. I'm in the process of acquiring that document. By the way, I sense you might appreciate the prospect of spending time behind bars. Remember our discussions about the security systems we installed? Well, I have a message for you." "No, George, my dear ex-husband. First, I want you to grasp something. You're akin to a persistent cockroach, a slippery sleazeball deserving of nothing. I'm securing a restraining order against you, so brace yourself for consequences if you attempt your antics again." Unsurprisingly, my stature in the community skyrocketed when news spread about the wealth beneath my property. Over the years, this newfound fame not only made me an overnight millionaire, but also brought lucrative brand deals, podcast invitations, and TV show opportunities. Currently, I'm in the process of penning my book, reflecting on the pride I feel for my achievements. Gratitude fills me for all that I've accomplished. I've replaced the furniture torn apart on that fateful night when I discovered George's infidelity. Despite the painful memories associated with my house, I chose growth, appreciating both the good and the bad. Instead of abandoning the place, I decided to enhance it. Though this house holds numerous unpleasant memories, it also preserves some good ones, particularly the moments when George stood at my doorstep, pleading to be let in, and I resisted. The symbolism was cathartic. Regarding my former partner, his connection with a colleague quickly fell apart when he found out about my unexpected financial gain from mineral rights. Unable to cope, he started revealing his genuine feelings towards her, and she, in turn, witnessed his true nature. I'm thankful that she realized it within just a year, unlike my decade-long struggle. The legal restraining order against George is enforced, and I believe he's regretting not taking advantage of those mineral rights earlier. Surprisingly, I've come to value his lack of proactivity, as it unexpectedly propelled me into millionaire status.